All right, welcome everybody to another developer interview here on the Game Wisdom channel. I'm of course Josh Bicer, and we have a great cast lined up tonight. My guest is a returning developer. He worked on the game Monster Train, and he's currently developing the recently announced game Baddieball. Please welcome back to the cast, Brian Cronin. How are you doing, Brian?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me back. I've been on at least four times at this point, I guess.
Yeah. And we've had a lot of great discussions, and it's been a while since our last one. I think what was maybe like February or March we last spoke or something like that.
Yeah, that sounds right. I can't even remember. That was, I think, 4 years ago.
Yeah, I know. But it's great to have you back on. I know you are busy, so we don't have 4 or 5 hours to talk, but we still have a lot of topics to get to today. So let's start, of course, with we kind of when the last time we spoke, we were just about the time for Monster Train, and since then it has come out. It's had multiple DLC, and I definitely want to give congratulations to you and the rest of the team on that one for sure.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's been going really good. That is through Shiny Shoe,
Hmm.
the company I work with, and yeah, I think it's done better than we thought it would. So that's always a good thing.
Hmm. So, I know we already spoke about the design of it last time you were on. So, just to kind of catch everybody up about what's been happening. So, are there any more plans for Monster Train in terms of DLC expansions? Because, again, as you said, the game definitely blew up for a lot of people. I know Shark and I are huge fans of it.
Yeah, we have. There's one DLC that's been announced. We've done a few updates to the game before the DLC that have already been released. So we added a bunch of new mutators, and those are kind of what changed the daily runs. And you can use mutators to create custom games. So we added a bunch of those just probably a couple months after release, and then we did a bigger update that added new champions
Hmm.
to the game. And so the DLC is adding a whole new clan. So the game by default has 5 clans, and so we're adding a sixth through the DLC.
Great. I know you guys have released several balance patches as well. I definitely want to at least touch on that for a minute. That for roguelike, and especially for any kind of deck building style games, balance is very key, and even just changing a few values can completely affect everything around it. So I just wanted to ask, like, for you and the rest of the team, what was kind of your overall approach to balance or adjusting things with Monster Train?
Yeah, so first of all, I don't do the balance and tuning myself. I
Mhm.
did some of the designs for cards and whatnot initially, but they go through a whole process of being tested and tuned. So initially, we just we're trying to find some cohesion for the clan. Each clan in Monster Train has like at least one or two central themes, kind of holding it together. And from there, we throw out card ideas and implement stuff. And I do a lot of those initial implementations because I'm an engineer, so it's easy for me to implement that stuff. So I do a lot of those initial implementations. A lot of things are just you're guessing what a value should be. I don't know. This seems like it should do 20 damage. Um, there was a card. Well, I guess I shouldn't get too into that. I don't know how much of it has been announced of the DLC yet. But anyway, there's some stuff that I'll tune things up way up high just because it's exciting, and I know it's going to be brought down through that process. But eventually, we have internal play testers that play the content. We update it pretty much daily with new stuff. A lot of bug fixing is what we're doing, but with that, there's a lot of tuning. So we have testers we really depend on to give feedback. They're able to give feedback directly into the game. You can press F8 Monster Train and send feedback directly into our company chat, which we get a lot of feedback that way, which has been great. And then it's just the slow process of tuning and hoping that you got it right.
Hmm. And as you said, one of your latest DLCs added in new champions to the game to add more when it comes to what choices you had. And I have to ask, like, how did like you and the team come up with like what kind of like faction designs you wanted for it? And again, especially with the new DLC, you're adding a new one.
Yeah, so the new DLC, it's the Wormkin. Wormkin is the name of the faction. In one of the rings of hell in our game is the Bogworm. People have probably seen the Bogworm, this dying or decayed worm, this great titan that existed in the world at some point. Anyway, this is like a faction that lives within the corpse of the bog worm. And so they play around with this new mechanic that internally we were initially calling corruption. It was the idea of like spreading corruption, but it now is themed around this idea of these echoes that, you know, I can't get into the lore of all of it. I don't fully understand all the lore, so there's a lot there to dig into. But anyway, you could think of it as like this corruption system. So in each room, you can add corruption, and then all the effects play into how much corruption is in each room. So that's kind of the starting premise. We also started with the idea of eggs. We knew we wanted to be able to like hatch eggs. It was just a silly thing that we decided we wanted to do. So there's also some mechanics around hatching eggs and like, you know, needing to wait for something to hatch to get a good unit to spawn out of the egg. So that was kind of the starting point there. You know, it's been more challenging to develop this faction than the first 5. You know, you kind of use up design space. And so, you know, we had our kind of aggro attack faction with the Hellhorn. We had our healing faction with the Awoken. We had our death focus faction with Remnant. And so, you know, you kind of use up that core design space and you start to have to really stretch your mind to figure out what are we going to add at this point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's the thing that I really did enjoy about Monster Train, that each faction has its own unique mechanic to it. And when you, of course, choose 2 as your start for each play, it very much gives you a lot of variance in terms of what abilities you have access to and how these runs can play out.
Yeah, that was one of the core things about the game. That came in very early. It wasn't in our very earliest prototypes because we didn't even have factions in those prototypes. But that concept got added pretty early on. We knew that we wanted, you know, we modeled a lot of the game initially off of Slay the Spire, and so they had this idea of factions. But you for the most part, you stay within the faction you're in. Mm-hmm. And I mean, that has a great advantage during development because it's just so much easier to balance things when you can depend on certain combinations not existing, right? Like the player cannot combine these 2 cards together. Okay. But we knew it would be also a lot of fun to be able to combine, almost like Magic the Gathering, where you usually combine 2 or 3 factions together to build a deck. That just, I don't know, gives you a lot more options and a lot more to unlock through that sort of mode.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and one thing that I definitely wanted to ask you about, Brian, because right now my 3rd book on roguelike design is, well, it's in the final review stage. So I spent the last like 4 or 5 months just thinking everything about roguelike design as I could. And one area that I found in particular is the idea of, you know, progressive difficulty or quote unquote ascension mode. This was something that we first saw with Slay the Spire, and of course with Monster Train, you guys have it with your Covenant system, the 25 levels of that. And since you're like my first like roguelike developer I have on at the moment who's done that system or worked with it, I just want to ask you, like, what were your thoughts on developing the 25 Covenants, and like how you and your team approach that?
Yeah, you know, unfortunately, I don't have great insight into that. Of course, worked on aspects of that, but more as an engineer than from a design sense. But I'm pretty familiar with how the system works. You know, initially, a funny little I can't pronounce that word. A funny little tidbit is initially, you know, the question was, how many should we have? How many of these covenant levels should we have? And a lot of that's about granularity versus, you know. So I think Slay the Spire has 20, if I'm remembering right. And so as a joke, I think we initially put in 21, just because we were like, well, let's do one more than they do, you know, just as a joke. Eventually we have 25 now. It's just kind of where it settled. So it's I was surprised with how important it is to the game, especially for Monster Train, which is, for anybody that's played, it's the way it's tuned is pretty extreme. It's like a extreme version of other deck builders. Just the kind of heights you can reach in Monster Train are much higher than most other games. So it was important that, you know, for beginners, they can play a version of Monster Train that is significantly easier, because there's just a lot of variance in the power level you can create in a deck. So we needed to be able to support people that can come in there with not building the perfect deck and still win. And that means that if we had these super granular ascension levels, difficulty levels, covenant levels we call in our game, we could just support a wider subset of gamers and skills within our game.
Yeah, and as you just said there, like when you play Monster Train or by extension like Slay the Spire at level 0 or the normal level, it is on, I wouldn't say it's easy, but you are generally free to make mistakes. Like it's not a case where I need my deck and my artifacts to be perfectly in tune or I will never win. And as you go up, and this is just an explanation for the people watching this, as you go up the Ascension level or Covenant level, you add in more modifiers. Enemies get stronger, you introduce trash cards, costs go in, or shop costs go up, etc., etc. And one thing that I definitely want to ask you was, how did the team decide what order to set up the Covenant system? Because that is a very important point about how this whole system works. Because when you get to Covenant 25, that is 25 nightmarish modifiers that are all weighing down your game to make things harder.
Yeah, unfortunately, I can't speak to that too much, but I can speak to. So there's a big difference between Covenant 0, which is just default, no extra difficulty, and Covenant 1. So Covenant 1, the thing it does that is most important is it adds in a few random cards to your deck from your two factions. Oh, I see the stream. Okay, never mind. I saw the stream just sort of hiccuped. So what that does is it really changes the core structure of the game, where now you start off with a little bit of randomization in your deck, and so it's kind of like now you have to improvise. Now you have to work within these constraints you're given, rather than just having a completely blank slate to start off of. But in terms of the order that we decided to put certain covenant levels at, I really don't remember or know the specifics of why certain things were chosen at a certain level. I think they were probably just tuned over time and adjusted as was needed. But yeah, I can't go too in depth on that, unfortunately. I just am not sure.
Yeah. And it is a very tricky balance when you're trying to build this into a game, because there are some of those that it doesn't seem like it matters all that much. Like raising shop price, it doesn't seem like it's going to hurt you as much. But then you get to something, I forget which covenant level you introduce. Each floor has a random, loses one capacity randomly for each battle, and all of a sudden it just feels like your entire strategy is screwed. Or, oh no, I know the perfect one. When you summon a character and for the first turn they are dizzy or you can't use them.
Right.
Like, that is the one that just, all of a sudden, everything that you know about the game just completely collapses in on itself when you get that one.
Yeah, and that's fun too, where you, rather than just being, you can imagine a version where it's like, okay, enemies are 1% stronger. Now they're 2% stronger. Now they're 3% stronger.
Yeah.
And that's not as interesting. That's just kind of like, yeah, the game's getting more difficult, but it not in a way where you're really going to notice or it matters. So it is fun having those, those big speed bumps that all of a sudden change fundamentally what you're doing. And another little funny tidbit is, we got to the point, we released the game and people were playing it, and people were winning Covenant 25 and they were doing so consistently. Like there's people that have win streaks at Covenant 25 that, dozens and dozens of wins in a row. Just they can consistently win level 25 with like any combination of classes just consistently. And so we're like, wow, how do we keep adding challenged for folks like that? So we added a whole custom challenge system into the game that once you get to level 25, you unlock these like custom challenges that add even more on top of it. Oh, Kevin is in the chat. Kevin is the artist on Baddieball.
Nice. Oh yeah, I definitely have some questions about the art and the aesthetics just from the screenshots you post as well, and we'll get to that in a few minutes. Yeah, and that is the trick. As you said, like you can't just keep going, now they have 5% more damage, now they have 10%. Because the other point is that you're dealing with a deck builder. You're dealing with set values on your cards and your options. So if you all of a sudden say, okay, every enemy now has 40 more points of health, well, a good majority of your cards are now going to be completely useless at that point.
Right. Yeah. So it's, something like days being applied is definitely an added level of challenge, but not in such a way that maybe completely invalidates a quarter of the cards that are in your deck.
Mm-hmm. And for the audience watching us live right now, if you do have any questions for Monster Train or anything regarding that, please get them in now because, like I said, we are on some of a time limit. We don't have 3 hours with Brian today, unfortunately, and we will be switching over to the bulk of this cast will be on Baddieball, probably in the next like 2 or 3 minutes. So I guess to quickly wrap up our Monster Train discussion, anything you can announce in terms of a timeline for when people will see the new DLC or major announcements, etc., etc.
Yeah, I don't know what's been specifically announced. I can never keep track of that, but I know it's early 2021 for this new DLC, which is our first paid DLC. We've done free updates to the game up to this point, but yeah, this one's a big enough thing. We've been working on it for several months now. That yeah, I think people are really into it though. It's going to add. It doesn't just add one clan because it's all the combinations. So it's combining this clan with all the existing clans you already know about. Just going to explode the amount of game that is there.
I guess as a quick question, is it going to come with one champion or two champions with the new faction?
Good question. Yeah, it comes with two champions, and as we've added more content to the game, like we've added. I forget exactly what we've added. Some more artifacts. Like I think each existing clan got one more artifact in the last update, and so now we're having to like keep up that pace for this new faction we're working on too.
And I guess one other question that I just want to ask you about: how was it designing, like, come up with the multiplayer idea for Monster Train? And for the people watching us who don't know what we're talking about, one of the modes in the game is that kind of like, I guess, a quote unquote race system where you have a group of people playing. It's the same seed, and you are graded on how fast you get through it. If you survive, if you get knocked out, of course, your run ends. And the winner is the one who gets the furthest while accumulating the most points.
Right. Yeah, so that came about very organically. I think at the time we were thinking about that, battle royales were really becoming popular. It was kind of like the time when the Tetris battle royale was coming out, the Mario one maybe, that sort of era where like there was the battle royale format was expanding to different genres. And so I don't remember if it was a joke initially or what, but we were kind of like, oh, it would be fun to add a battle royale mode to Monster Train. So that's how it was initially conceived. And so it was added in mostly by our network engineer pretty quickly, just probably over a period of a week. He added in a very rough version of it. And it was immediately obvious to, I think, most of us on the team that this was going to be like, we needed to add this to the game to the point where I think we dropped another one or two things we were planning to do just so we could fit this into the budget. But it was, and we actually play tested the game using that Hell Rush mode up through release. We would like, okay, we're play testing, let's all do a Hell Rush together. And it's just, I don't know, it's a card game. So it's a game where you have as much time as you want to decide what the perfect play is. And all of a sudden under Hell Rush, you have this timer and social pressure. And so now you're like, it's not about making the best decision. It's about making the fastest decision that is not the worst.
Mm-hmm.
So it completely turned the game upside down, which was great.
Yeah, but when you add a time limit into a turn-based game, that just completely like wrecks your sense of strategy in these kinds of games.
Yeah. I thought it was really fun. It's not for everyone, but I think it's super fun to play, especially with a group of friends.
Mm-hmm. All right, so I think with that, we'll switch over to Baddieball now. And again, for the audience watching, if you haven't checked out Monster Train yet, definitely give it a go. Do you know if it will be a part of any of the upcoming like Steam sales or holiday sales, Brian, for people who are interested in it?
I imagine so. I don't actually know the details of that,
Okay.
but yeah, I think people can expect that.
All right. So with that said, let's get to our main topic and discuss a little bit about Baddieball. And this was announced, I think it was like a week or so ago at the time of this recording? Or of the stream?
Yeah, Monday of last week, yep.
Mm-hmm. So, for those of you watching this, you can see the little icon underneath Brian's name there. It definitely has a very striking look. I know you guys announced it with a little bit of some weirdness in terms of what we're going to be doing. So, for the audience here, and I guess for myself as well, what is Baddieball in a nutshell?
Yeah, I think we're still learning that to some extent. But Baddieball is a project I'm working on outside of my work on Monster Train. So it's a much smaller time commitment at this point. It's something I just put about an hour a day into. Yeah, very small team. So I started working on this project in February of this year. It started after about 2 years ago, I read the book Moneyball, which people might be familiar with. And then there's a Brad Pitt movie also called Moneyball. So I ended up watching that movie early this year, or late last year, I think I ended up watching it. And there's a scene where there's a complicated trade happening. For people that don't know, that's a game about the Oakland A's, a baseball team. And it's about how they used mathematics and science to figure out the value of players rather than just sort of gut feeling. So that all started probably late 2019, and I started working on it seriously, the digital version, in early 2020. It started off as just a card game, a digital card game, and it was in the sort of auto battler subgenre. So that's where it was. I worked on it. I put almost 200 hours into that version of the game, and then sometime in May, this image here popped up. I don't know if you're able to make it any bigger. Maybe that's not something we want to mess with in the middle of the stream, but this image popped up on my Twitter feed. A friend of mine liked it, and I instantly fell in love with it. And so that's Kevin's computer in the chat here. You can follow him on Twitter. But he posted this piece of art. Yeah, thank you. Just as like just a piece of art he made, a digital piece of art. He said, "You want to play a game, you know?" And I instantly knew, like, this is what I'm making. I just didn't know it yet. So I connected up with Kevin based on this piece of art, and we started talking, and I kind of talked to him about the concept I had, and we started working on it together in probably mid-May.
Okay. So with the design of it now, is it still following that kind of auto battler, or has the design changed at all?
Yeah, so it's so what it is you are managing a team within this league. So there's the Baddieball League. It might have 6 or 8 teams in it. These are your friends you're playing against. So it's a multiplayer game. So each of your friends has their own team of baddies. They're all villains, you know, in their own way. So you're managing this team. What you're doing is you're trading players, you're upgrading players, you're maybe giving them performance enhancers, for example, or giving them items that give them special little passive benefits. And then you're going to have games that happen throughout. You're going to play over the period of maybe a week. That league is operating over a period of a week. So it's not a game you just, play on a Tuesday night. You're playing it on Wednesday night and Thursday night. So you're playing it every single day. Now, the time commitment is not going to be huge, because what you're doing is you're making these trades, and then you're scheduling your rosters for each game. So if I know I'm playing Josh on Wednesday night, I know Josh has some really good imps. He's all about fire imps. So I'm going to play my Yeti, and I'm going to play my Snowman, and I'm going to play my characters that counter the imps, because the imps are all about fire. So those are the sort of decisions I'm making, and I'm scheduling these games, and then I can watch the games happen live, or I can watch them happen after. And the battles themselves, kind of the players, I tell them to go out in the field, and then they do their best to win that game for me.
So it sounds like this is more of, I forget the term, not simultaneous turn. It sounds like kind of like more like a play by email kind of format.
Yes.
Almost.
Yeah. It's what is sometimes called asynchronous multiplayer. Yeah. Right. Rather than playing at the exact same time as someone else, you're making these trade offers to each other, and all of that is happening, and then you're watching these games happen after the fact.
So one thing that I definitely wanted to ask, or one that I wanted to comment on, while I'm looking at the art, I know we have people in the chat who are also loving the art and the aesthetic of that image there. One thing that just immediately popped in my mind was kind of the promotional art for Earthbound. You remember that from back in the day from Nintendo, when they had like these almost like, I'm not sure it looked like clay, but like these like very like weird, like almost like the character designs, like just like those 4 characters on screen, like they could be Earthbound enemies in that game.
I don't remember those renders specifically, but yeah, it definitely has a certain, I don't know, toy aesthetic. Some people call it a clay aesthetic.
Yeah.
Um, yes, so we're doing our best to, we're bringing these characters into the game, and it's kind of the idea of sort of the idea of collection of. There's a lot of just little elements that we're playing with and bringing together.
So besides the asynchronous multiplayer, it does sound like this is more of a character collector, or kind of like those character management sims that we see a lot from like the independent space over the last like 5 to 10 years. I know there's like some like about gladiators is a very popular example of that. With Baddieball, I guess how does I guess character development or character collection work?
Character development, that's more a question for Kevin, who's in the chat, who maybe we could have Kevin on at some point. Yeah, that just comes from, I don't know, his imaginings, and I'm sure he has many different inspirations. So what we're doing is we're taking the characters. I kind of want Kevin to just be able to go out there and create whatever wacky characters he wants to create. And then we'll figure out how to make them work in the game after the fact. So I'm trying to think of a good example of that. Yeah, one example is he did a gesture character. It's just sort of a circus gesture, or a gesture in a king's court. This sort of mocking sort of character. And so we kind of knew this had to be a taunt thing. So we added a taunt ability so that now the gesture will do the little taunt ability, and then enemies will focus on the gesture. So gesture kind of turns into a damage soak sort of thing. That's one example of how we're taking the visual design and then figuring out how to make it work within the game.
Mm-hmm. And again, the chat is just loving the art there. I guess in terms of like the character designs, you mentioned a few minutes ago about having like imps and yetis and stuff like that. How does I guess like the different characters like factor into each other with the game?
Yeah, that's stuff we're working through right now, actually. So we also have a talented designer named Johnny Trevoranis, and they're helping us with a lot of these details of like how characters interact in combat. So we want to develop items, for example. And that's something we haven't done yet, but we have plans to have items. And one example might be, there might be a set of items that only the imps can use. And so they might interact with the fire abilities, for example. And that idea is really everything about this game is ultimately about trading. That's like the core thing you're doing in this game. The game is, about trading. So we like this idea of having certain characters that can only use certain items, because then that might motivate trades. And it might motivate trades in ways that are like, we like the idea of having some social elements too, where there's a little bit of subterfuge within the trades. Like, why am I being offered this character right now? Why do they really want this character that doesn't seem that good? I have a character on my team that's not that good. Why do they want this character? Well, they might have some item that pairs with that character that you don't know about.
I guess how do you get items in Baddieball?
We don't fully have that figured out yet. We think there's going to be an item shop. So this game is still pretty early in development. We've been working on it since May, but it's very part-time. So, we've basically we have the combat functioning. We have a whole like trading system, but there's a lot of stuff that we need to layer on top. So items we don't have fully figured out yet, but I imagine it's going to be, you're going to have a budget for your team that you're going to use in trading, and you're going to use in purchasing items and all sorts of things like this.
So I guess in terms of the structure of the game, like, is it set up kind of along lines of a quote unquote match being like a season, or is it going to be something like more like a long term kind of thing that you are taking your team, whatever items you get, from season to season to maybe like a championship or a playoff game or something like that?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's going to be both, in the sense that you're going to join a season or start a season and invite your friends, and that's going to run over the course of a week, and that's a self-contained thing. So over that week, you're going to grow your team, make it better, upgrade characters, all sorts of stuff. And then that season's going to have an end. Like, someone's going to win the championship that season, But we do want this idea of there being like a greater degree of persistence. And we have a few ideas in how that can come to be. One is just like a progressive set of leagues. So it could be that if you win maybe we call it a casual league, which is you and your friends, that gets you a ticket to enter into a regional league. So now you can enter into like the United States or the West Coast or however we want to delineate that league, and that might be a more limited thing of like there's only 10 players that get to enter into that this month. And so that's one idea of like taking in your success in a casual league and going into a bigger and bigger league. Another, we're talking about, you might be able to like choose one or two players from the league you just played and bring them into a second league on your team. So we like this idea of like in some way. Now we don't think we could just make it so you start with the same team you had, because we want a new player to the game to be able to be competitive with you. So there's a balance there. And we're also talking about the idea of a trophy room where you can display and like share your success with other people.
So from how you're describing that, you kind of want like each league or each season to be kind of its own, like kind of encapsulated. Like, you don't want somebody to be able to say, I'm going to take my 5 best characters who I just completely won, the previous league. I'm just going to bring them into this next one. You're all screwed, basically.
Yeah, I think so, because like I said, we want this to be a game that new people can jump into without having that roster fully developed. But that being said, we're this. I think the development approach here is about iteration. So I think down the road, if we come to the point where people really want to see these characters in future leagues, there's options we can explore of like people that have played enough of this game and have built up a collection of these players. They can have some way to play them again in a league that's on a level playing field.
Now, I think one big question I'm sure people are wondering about. We've been talking about this as a multiplayer game. Will there be any like AI modes or like a single player campaign for this?
Yeah, another good question. It's something we've talked about. We did the initial version of this game we produced. We did a sort of just a little demo, and it's all single player. But the full vision of this game is what I've been describing, this like ongoing week-long, month-long league that you play with your friends. And we're a very small team. We're 3 people right now doing this very, very part-time. And so we can only really put our effort into one thing. And so that's what we've chosen to put it into. That being said, down the line, there's of course opportunities to do a single player mode or something, where you can play this on your own. But initially the vision we have is the full-blown asynchronous multiplayer version.
I guess, how many players do you think max per league are you looking at?
I think it's going to be about 8. I think 6 is going to be a really good number, and then 8 will probably work well too. But it might surprise. So another vision we have, and this is more long-term, is that so there's like different terminology here. The players within the league, within the game, let's call them characters, they will be unique. So the idea is if you're playing with 6 friends and you each have 10 players on your team, that would be 60 unique characters in that game. So that's where we want to get. We want to get to the point where you actually can have 60 unique characters within that game. So that somewhat limits how many teams we can support. That's kind of what we're thinking.
So with the character designs themselves, as you said, there's going to be some more like an auto battler in the sense that once the game plays, you're not going to be controlling things too much. How do these characters like interact with each other? Like, have you gone like that far in terms of when you're watching the game? Are they going to be playing baseball, or are they just going to be running around beating each other up or throwing fireballs or whatever?
The idea is at some point within the history of this game, the lore, they played baseball, like they were playing baseball, and it's sort of this league where they're basically in hell, right? The baddies. And so what they're trying to do is the winner of the league gets to go to the good land, I think is what Kevin calls it, if I'm remembering right. And that's basically heaven. So they're all competing to try and go to good land. They're in bad land, but only one team can do that. So it used to be that they would play baseball as we see it, but now over the years, over the centuries, it's sort of devolved. And now what they do is, the ump says play ball, they immediately rush the mound and just fight. So it's just a fighting game. They don't actually play baseball. They just fight each other. And so it looks like they're each on their side of the field, 3, 2, 1 countdown, play ball, and they each just approach each other and hit each other with bats and throw baseballs at each other, and they just fight until one team is standing.
There we go. So just so we just got it's basically what, like baseball meets hockey then? Like we just avoid everything, just get right to the fighting?
Just the fighting part of hockey, yeah. Yeah, or I think everyone's seen those clips of a pitcher throwing a ball at a batter and then hitting the batter, and then the batter rushes the mound, and then all of a sudden you have like 50 people just in a melee in the middle of the field. That's just how every game of Baddieball starts, is with that rush in the mound.
It sounds like it'll be very exciting. I guess, have you thought about like how like character balance works? Like, is there like a rock paper scissors system, or just general like a stat based thing?
This is what's sort of beautiful about this. It is stat based. We have some interesting concepts around that, but one of the awesome things about this game is we don't have to worry too much about balance. So like, there's gonna be some characters that are like way above the average curve, and some that are just not that good. And it all works out because you're trading characters. So it's all about trading. There's going to be a lot of synergies within, like if you build out a team of imps, there's going to be some really obvious synergies that work really well with you have a bunch of imps together. So all that kind of stuff will be there. You can think of it more as a card game in that sense. I mean, I've made card games for years now, so it's not a card game, but sort of the design sense is from that sphere. So it is stat based. One of the ideas we're playing with, and this we've been actively developing this week and last week, is that you don't actually know what the stats are. You don't know the exact numbers. So this character's speed, like this character, you'll know, oh, this character is pretty fast, but you won't know how fast. And same with like attack damage and HP. All these stats you won't know exactly. And this is sort of modeling the idea that, if you're a scout in Major League Baseball, you go and watch some people play. You don't know their stats. You don't know that, like, I guess we can measure how fast a pitcher throws, but you don't know, like, people don't have stats, right? It's something we derive after the fact. And so we like that idea with Baddieball too, where you can derive after the fact and figure out how good a player is. But up front, you only know vaguely how good they are. It's not going to be completely hidden. Like, you're going to know this character is complete crap or this character is really, really good. You'll know that, but you won't know exactly where the numbers are.
So I guess with the whole trading system, are you trading like player to player? Is there like a pool that you bet on, or you try to poach players from that?
It's going to be a bit of both, because there's a question of like, how do you seed the teams initially? How do you start off with players? So initially, when you join a league, there's going to be a period of time where you have access to a pool of players, and you can just buy them. They're free agents. So this imp here in this image, that imp might be 50 peanuts. The currency in this game is peanuts. So you can just buy that player for 50 peanuts. You might have a total of 500 peanuts to put together a team. So that's how you initially get a team. You'll just sort of have a private pool of characters you can choose from to build your initial team. After that, you're going to trade with other players in the league. So you're going to, like I said, you don't know exactly how good a player is. So you're going to draft all these players, and you might learn, oh, this rat character I have, I thought it was going to be really good with my composition, but it's not really working out. I feel like that's a weakness on my team right now. But I see that Johnny has another imp that would be really good for my team, and Johnny might actually want this rat because I know that they have this rat character here that they might. So that's sort of how it's going to play out at that point. Throughout the league too, we'll probably have other free agents that become available, but we haven't fully decided how that's going to work. So we don't want the league to solidify throughout the week. We want it to always be in the state of change, a little bit of flux as you're playing.
So how do like synergies and I guess conversations like that play out. As in, if I have, two characters or two classes or a species who are supposed to be compatible, how does that like kind of like factor in when it comes time to play?
Yeah, so a good example is, we have this basic imp. We have two imp characters in the game right now. We have this one, and then we have one called Akuyami, which is a Japanese interpretation of an imp. So they're both imps. Like they have that subtype. You could think of it like they're imps, And so we haven't implemented this yet, but we're gonna have a character that has the ability that does extra damage for every other imp in play, or for all the friendly imps in play. However, we're gonna word it, I'm not sure. So it might do plus 10 damage as long as there's two other imps in play. So that's an example, just like an explicit example of the way you're going to synergize. So if you have that character that scales based on the number of imps, you might be really motivated to get a lot of imps onto your team. But of course, there's going to be counter strategies to that. So that might not work in every game. You might have to have an alternate strategy in cases where you're going to be countered by something.
So I guess like continue with that line then. In terms of like winning a match, is it just going to be last man or last character standing as the winner?
So something we're playing with now is the idea of innings. So the way the game works now is you play 3 innings. Each inning is the same. You just start off with it's 5-on-5. So you have your 5 characters over there. They have their 5 characters over there, and then they fight. And it is last Batty standing. So whoever is surviving at the end, that team wins the inning. So you get 1 point if you win an inning, and then it's best of 3. However, where the way you get money is by winning innings and games. So if you win an inning, you might get, let's say, 10 peanuts, and if you win the game, you might get 50 peanuts. So even if you lose the game, as long as you can win an inning, you're going to at least get some peanuts out of it.
Okay. And can characters be like killed or knocked out from the league during like a run?
I love that you're. It's funny. You're going through like all of the things that we've been talking about recently. Like it's fun to just explain this concept to you and then like watch you rederive all the stuff we're thinking about. I don't know. It gives me confidence that it's like the shared mind spaces. So yeah, this is something we've talked about a good amount recently. We're not settled on any decision yet because obviously, if you invest a lot into a player and then they die, that can be very traumatic. But we do like the idea of injury, so there are going to be injuries. So I don't know what's going to cause an injury, but something might cause your player to be injured, and that might just mean that they need to rest for 2 games before they're ready to play again. And then there's going to be like I talked about the item shop before. You can get a health pack or however we structure that. It might be a milkshake you give them that heals them instantly. So you'll be able to spend some of your peanuts to heal that player. But yeah, there's definitely going to be injuries. We think the idea of a player dying is hilarious, and we like that idea. But I don't know exactly how that's going to shake out.
Yeah, but and again, like with games like this, especially anything that lets you like create a team or have like your own personalized characters or customize. As you said, like it's very exciting to see characters live or die. It's never good when it's on one of your characters. Like your favorite guy just gets like wiped out immediately.
But it would be hilarious to kill another player. It would be a funny moment. So I think we're really inspired by this idea of having these moments that you're going to remember and tell people. So it's a balance of like, you're messing with people's emotions basically. So, how mean do you want to be? I don't know.
After that, so are there any like league affecting events that can happen? Like you're playing a game and all of a sudden there's an earthquake, or let's say for this week there's giant like hawks that come down grab players or things like that.
Yeah, now you're getting a little bit ahead of us here. Like we I don't think we've talked about this concept yet too explicitly. I think we've danced around this idea. I think we talked about it in terms of stadiums. Like you're going to have like a home stadium that you can choose, and there might be some effect on the home stadium. You could imagine like the Yetis have a home stadium. Like if you want your home stadium to be the Yeti land, then it's going to be cold and it's going to be icy and it's going to be slippery and stuff like that. But no, we've not talked. I love that idea. We haven't put too much thought into it yet.
Mm-hmm. Like as we're talking about this, like that episode of Futurama, like comes in my head when they're playing. It was like Blurn's Ball or something. Like all of a sudden, they release the spiders, and then Multi-Ball shows up.
Octocactus has a good idea, a good question. Are there going to be baddies that are straight up stronger than others? And yes, absolutely. The players are not going to be balanced against each other. They're not balanced in real sports. There's some players that are better than others, and that's all about like trading is all about that. So the core of this game is trading. Every decision we're making is revolving around the idea of trading these baddies with other people. And so, there's going to be some baddies that are just straight up better than others. Also, like playing into that idea, we have this fun idea of you can inject your players with performance enhancing drugs that we'll just call performance enhancers. And so you might do that a couple games and like give them like better. They'll appear to be better than they are. And then you're going to trade that player with your friend. But look at the recently, this player's, I've won 2 games with this player. They're doing great. And you'll make that trade, and then they'll be disappointed to learn, oh, they have drugs in their system that are going to fade away and cause an injury or something. So we want to play with those social elements too.
So I guess the concept like the Bad News Bears, like the taking the very rookie joke team to the playoffs is probably not going to happen too much in Baddieball.
It might. I mean, we want to have pretty high variance. Baseball is a game that has very high variance. The best team in the league probably only has a 65% chance of beating the worst team in the league. That's why they play so many games in baseball. The baseball season is, has 500 games or whatever. So we like the idea of there being some high variance. Like even if you don't have a good team, you're still going to win some games. It might be tough to win the whole league, but you're still going to win some games.
John has a good question. Are attributes lost in trades like just a bad roll?
No, I think, whatever that player is when you trade it, it'll continue to be that. Now, like I mentioned, the idea of performance enhancers, that might affect things. And then there's also this idea of trading, like equipping an item onto a player and trading it. So I don't think there's going to be any way to trade items directly, but you can equip items to players and then trade that player, which will trade the item as well. Mm-hmm. So that kind of plays into that idea.
All right. Well, there's the next set of questions. I'm curious to see how much I'm like reading your and your team's minds with these design questions. So the first one is for like the character designs themselves. I guess are they going to be? I'm not sure how I want to phrase this. Are they going to be set as in my red imp will have the exact same stats or the exact same personality as your red imp? Or will there be aspects, I know a lot of character games like this may have, this character has the curious trait, so maybe they're 3% faster, or this character is scattered brain, or easily angered, or etc.
Yeah, so there is randomization involved. When a character is generated in a league, all of its stats are randomized, and we define that per character. So it could be that imps generally will do, let's say, around 20 damage. Now, you might get one that does 40, and you might get one that only does 10, but like the average might be 20.
Okay.
Versus like you might have a separate character, like this rat character. Maybe it only really does 5 damage, but it has some other ability to make up for that. So, there's a lot of randomization when a character is generated in terms of its stats. In addition, we like the idea of there being, like you said, these almost random little status effects that can be applied to characters, just to make it, just to add some other little randomization into it. But we haven't gotten to the point of developing that system yet.
Okay. And with any kind of character collector, team manager kind of games, I think one question that always comes up is personalization. Will there be, custom uniforms, skins, knickknacks, however you want to describe it, that you can put on your characters?
Yeah, this is something that has been troubling Kevin lately. So in this image here, you can see all 4 of these characters have a jersey on, which really helps unify it. But there's been some character designs lately that Kevin's been doing where a jersey just doesn't make sense. It doesn't fit the character. We talk a lot about team colors. Like, we love the idea of being able to have team colors and a team name that you can set up. So we love those ideas, but it's when it comes down to in practice, when you have like we have a cactus character, for example, that shoots out spikes. That character kind of needs to be green. Like, to make sense that it's a cactus, it needs to be green. And so if we start doing custom colors, there's a lot of color clashing with the jerseys, where you can like create situations where the character just looks nonsensical. So we're working through that right now. We're not sure what to do about it yet. One idea is just to always have a number on the back of the player that can be color coded. It's just, like they each would have a number you can set up. But in short, we definitely want to have team customization, but we're working out how best to do that, like balancing the desire to have like pretty freeform characters in the game.
Yeah, and again, like with games like this, it's very true to know just how far you can go with personalization, because it's never enough, I think, for a lot of people. They want to put everything and anything onto their guys.
Yeah, it's the balance of it. So we're not sure how to do it yet.
All right. And for the chat watching, we're probably going to wrap things up in the next 5 or 10 minutes. I know you have to get going, so this will be officially last call for questions from the chat. I just have a few more to ask you about the game, and then I will let you go. So one thing that we didn't discuss, I think is always very important for these kinds of games, is what does long-term play look like for Baddieball? As in, am I unlocking permanent rewards? Is there, unique things I can get for winning? Like, what do you and your team envision is kind of like what's going to keep people playing this game, week after week, or, whatever you want to structure it as?
Yeah, I think there's two ways that we're going to approach that. One is that we're planning to develop this game pretty much in the open, as we've already been doing. And we're going to develop it over time. So, we don't have an exact date of when we're going to do a release, but we want to do a somewhat public release. It might be limited to people on our Discord server if people want to join that. But initially, we want to get it out to people as soon as possible. So sometime next year, we're gonna have a semi-public release where people can play it. And we want to update it over time. So part of those updates, we want to keep adding new characters. So I think that's going to be really fun for folks to be able to play the game, and then next month there's going to be an update to Baddieball, and they're going to add 4 new characters. So that's really going to change the dynamic of, if you're always having new characters added to the game, I think it's going to be really exciting to see how those all interact with existing strategies. So that's one thing. The second, you're talking about the idea of permanence of progress. This is something we've not fully thought out yet, but we love the idea of a trophy room of winning leagues and going on streaks and all this kind of stuff. We like the idea of collection. So I think there's going to be this idea of collecting little bobbleheads or something, like little miniature versions of these characters. Without Kevin having to redesign them all, by the way, Kevin, I'm not committing you to that work. But the idea of actually being able to collect these players. So maybe if you win a game with the player on your team, you get a basic bobble character. If you win a league with that player on your team, you get a gold bobble character. But the idea of collecting, there's going to be, we hope dozens of these characters to draft onto your team and trade and eventually collect in various ways. So that's another avenue we're looking at. Collection as people love these characters already. They want to have them in some form. So the idea of just being able to collect them in some sort of trophy room, I think would be really awesome.
Yeah. And trophy room designing is always a really fascinating topic. We don't have the time to get into that too much, but yeah, having that place to store your trophies, bobbleheads, just anything that you've won, I think is always a great thing for these kinds of titles.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's a lesson I learned with Monster Train is people love. We have a log book where you get to see all the stuff you've done and see your progress, and that's really motivating to people. And it's also satisfying to see see your progress. Like these
Yeah.
individual games you're playing add up to something greater. So we
Yeah.
definitely want to capture that idea in some way in Baddieball.
I mean, as you said, you don't want to make too much in terms of like stat permanence or character permanence, because that can wreck leagues going forward. But it's always nice to have something permanent that you can say, I accomplished this in this league
Mm-hmm.
or whatever.
Yeah, definitely. I know people are going to want that. And yeah, it's the kind of like trophy room concept. It wouldn't feed back into the game. It would just be this place for you to display and track things over time.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, I know people are going to want some way to bring it back into the game as well. So that's something we're just going to discover over time, how best to support that.
All right. So with that, before I get to like kind of like a rapid fire like final questions, anything else regarding Batty Ball from a design or aesthetic standpoint that we didn't touch on that you'd like to bring up now?
Um, no, I think we covered a lot here. I think people, if they are interested in the aesthetic more, they should go follow Kevin's Computer on Twitter. He has a lot of other artwork too beyond Batty Ball. Most of his artwork is just other stuff, but he has a solid aesthetic that yeah you should go check out. And definitely we have a Batty Ball Twitter account too that people can follow to get more of that.
All right. So with that, just like a few just very quick questions for you, Brian. As you said, the game is you're still developing now, so we don't have anything set concrete in terms of when it's going to come out. But what platforms are you thinking about for Batty Ball? Mobile, PC, Steam, etc.
Initially we're focusing on PC just because it's sort of the easiest to develop for. And we're very time limited on this project, so it's all about just efficiency right now. But I think it would be awesome to be able to play it on mobile because it is a game that you can
Mm-hmm.
imagine you might want to check in on a trade while you're on your way to work on the train or something. So yeah, eventually mobile would be cool. I am keeping that in mind while developing it. That's a place we might like to go in terms of constraining certain technologies we use. Um, Beyond that, it's just hard to say. I think it would fit Switch aesthetically for sure, but we haven't explored that concept yet.
All right. I guess here's the big question: do you see this as being like a free to play game, or will come with a price tag or a retail price?
That is to be determined. Yeah, we don't know exactly how people are gonna be able to, I guess, contribute towards development in that way, but we'll see. It is a game that will have a server component, so uh, we are gonna have to pay for that somehow.
Mm.
Yeah.
All right. Well, with that, I think we will wrap things up. Again, we could just sit here and chat about Monster Train or Batty Bowl design for the next few hours, but I know you have to get going. So, to end this cast on, any other social media sites, anywhere else you'd like to plug before I let you go?
Yeah, I mostly point people towards Twitter at Baddieball. That's our central place we're going to be posting. And if anybody wants to join our Discord, we're trying to figure out how to make that fun for people. We're pretty new to, or at least I'm new to a Discord community, but we have a pretty strong following already. So it's been fun watching that develop.
All right. So I think with that, we will wrap things up for today. Again, Brian, it's a pleasure chatting with you about design, and hopefully we can have another chat before another like 2, 3 years of time. It feels like passes.
Yeah, we'll check in with you again once we have a little bit more to show. I think it'd be fun to be able to show some stuff by then too.
All right. So, for everybody tuning in, thank you for watching this live, or if you're tuning in recorded. If you're interested in learning more about game design and such, be sure to check out the Game Wisdom Discord channel and Patreon. They are always going to be linked down below. For the recorded version, there should be links to more information about Monster Train and Batty Ball in the description. And other than that, if you are a developer working on a game or have something coming out real soon and want to chat about it, we are always looking for guests. I will be back later tonight for our regular game stream, but come back for daily discussions on game design here and on game wisdom, where we examine the art and science of games. Until next time, everybody, have a great rest of your day. Take care.
Thanks.